Good morning, everyone. It is 9:30 a.m. on April 7th. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. Let's all rise. For this invocation this morning, I'd like to ask Commissioner Sandelli to say the prayer.
Lord, thank you for the blessings of this new day. Please continue to watch over all of us as we meet both the opportunities and challenges before us. Please guide all who serve our community. Keep them safe, so we may serve others. In your name, we give thanks. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. This morning we'll begin with the recap where we talk about any additions or deletions to the agenda. I have none. The only thing is we'll have a couple under the county manager item is where we'll talk about COVID-19 and the situation related to that in Lee County. And we'll also talk about, it looks like, a burn ban resolution. And the county attorney will talk about the third extension of the COVID-19 state of local emergency resolution too. So lots of interesting stuff. But first, let's move on with the consent agenda. Commissioner Mann, do you have anything you'd like to pull?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have none. Commissioner Pendergrass?
None.
Commissioner Sandelli, anything? None. Okay, so we have nothing to pull for discussion. Does anybody wish to speak in public comment on any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Do I have a motion to approve the balance?
Motion.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Pendergrass to approve the consent agenda, and the second is from Commissioner Mann. Do we have any discussion on that? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Okay. At this time, I'd like to convene as the Board of Port Commissioners of the Lee County Port Authority, and I'd like to ask Ben Siegel to come and introduce the item we'll talk about today. Morning, Ben.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It's nice to see everybody this morning. So this item that we brought forward today is really to discuss and make a recommendation regarding two projects that we've discussed quite a bit, I think, over the past probably year or more publicly. The first one being passenger boarding bridge replacement, second one being the terminal expansion. We learned a little bit more in the last few days regarding the passenger boarding bridge project. Initially, my conversations with you revolved around deferring that project until we could get a better handle on our finances as it relates to the funding for that project. We currently are on the streets to bid that project, and at this time are recommending that we do go forward with receiving the bids. And the reason for that is we've learned that there may be some opportunities having projects shovel ready, if you will, that are ready to go and construct, that the federal government may be willing to include in some sort of stimulus package, if you will, to kind of, keep the economies going. It's a $40 to $50 million project. So we want to take a look at the bids, work with the federal government, the FAA in particular, and see if we might be able to receive some substantial funding to move that project forward. In the event that we cannot secure any federal funding, we would then suggest that we reject bids and move forward with deferring that project. Are there any questions on that particular project?
So questions on the passenger boarding bridge project, Commissioner Mann?
Do you have a general feeling about the overall construction market? Has the slowdown related to the virus made a more favorable atmosphere for construction bidding?
I don't have, my gut tells me that obviously there's a lot of people out there that want to continue to work, and some of the articles that I've read and even in some of the calls that I've had with other airport directors around the country, that there's a sense that, yeah, we may be in a position where there's some favorable bids that we may get on various projects. So, but I have
that sense.
I have that sense too.
Me that yes, we're doing the right thing and moving forward the way he's described it. but I don't know that for a fact or scientific or.
And, we look at this, so this is, almost a $45-50 million project, the passenger boarding bridge. It's an opportunity to really pump $45-50 million into the economy if we can for this project. So it does make a lot of sense right now. Let's take a look at the bids and see if they're real favorable and the federal government steps up. We may be able to do this project very economically. And quite frankly, it's a project that we do need to get done. Our bridges are old. They need to be replaced. We can survive another year if we need to, but it would certainly be nice to be able to get it done if we can do it, do it the right way. So,
Excellent. Any other questions, Commissioner
I
Pendergrass?
support the project move forward because, like you said, in a few months, hopefully traffic will resume and hopefully numbers be different next year compared to this year. So I think we need to get the project online because I think there will be a change in the market. I think the construction is going to be there, but I think the market with the bonding and everything else is going to change. But I think it will be in our favor, though.
so we're hoping for, sir.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a couple things. One is I certainly think people want to get back to work. Secondly, I think material costs will probably be a little bit more in our favor because of the delays in other projects. I think the biggest concern is can we pull the trigger on the financing? Will that be available? And I think, Ben, that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. So that covers the passenger boarding bridges. Did you want to talk about the other part of it? Okay.
So the terminal expansion project, we are getting ready to bid this month. And it's a heavily financed project. Estimates, as you know, are in the $250 million plus range. A significant funding source for that project is passenger facility charges, and it's in the neighborhood of $150 to $160 million for that portion of it, which we were leveraging passenger facility charge collections for the construction of this project. Obviously, passenger facility charges is not a stable source of revenue right now for this. So there is really, it would be silly for us at this time to go out and do bidding when we have no really financial resources to commit to the project at this time. Again, we expect that to change over time. But passenger facility charges are charges that are paid for when you book a ticket. The airlines collect it and remit that to the airport. We use that revenue on a pay-as-you-go basis, or as we can leverage it for long-term financing, and that's what we'd be doing with this project. So the uncertainties with that revenue stream and obviously the financial markets, we're recommending a deferral for 1 year. And the reason we're picking a year is that we had the schedule was very sensitive to our season. So the idea of starting October 1, that schedule was built around being able to start and phase it around our different seasons as the project goes on. So we're comfortable by saying, let's just defer it for 1 year, keep that same sensitive schedule around our season and begin and plan to do our bidding next April and start the project in October. Now, if there's an opportunity, just like the passenger boarding bridges, for funding, we would definitely be back here to talk about a revised schedule or something different to move the project forward. But that's where we're at on that particular project. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on that. So.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions on that part of it?
I think it goes back to my comments earlier. Ben, I would love to see us try to stay as close to on track as we could. And I think as you explore for the passenger boarding, I would also try to see what the availability is of funds in that same venue, for the expansion.
Yeah. Great.
Good. What other questions? Any others? No?
That's all I have.
Okay. So the motion you're looking for, Mr. Siegel, is to defer the terminal expansion project by 1 year.
Yeah, up to 1 year.
Up
Yep.
to 1 year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have somebody who would like to make that motion?
I make the motion to defer for 1 year the item.
Okay. So the motion is from Commissioner Pendergrass. The second is from Commissioner Mann. Okay. Very good. Let me ask real quick, Ben, if you could step aside. Let me ask for public comment. Does anybody wish to speak in public comment on this? Okay, I'll close public comment. Ben, you're welcome to come back if you'd like. Just making sure that we get everything in order. All right, any further discussion on this item?
Only that I would like to see us continue to explore financing, and if that financing becomes available, that we can get back to a more aggressive schedule.
Can't agree more.
I was going to say, I would totally agree with that as well. Commissioner Sandelli, once we get a little more clarity around what's going to happen to passenger facility charges and maybe even potential more federal money that could help us out, we'll look at that, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
we can't agree more.
Okay, very good. All right, any further discussion? Are there any objections? No objections, that motion carries unanimously. You have everything you need?
Oh, we got him, can I ask?
Sure, yeah.
I appreciate the frequent updates you've been giving us on the tremendous impact that the airport's undergoing because of the circumstances right now. But just top of your head, give us both in passengers and flights approximate percentage in reductions that we're experiencing this time over last year.
Sure. So from a flight activity perspective, we're probably down about 60% flights. There's more canceled flights than what we have actual flights, but we are still running over 100 flights a day, believe it or not. The issue is there's just not a lot of people on them.
Yeah.
So from a passenger perspective, we're down, I'm going to say somewhere between 90-95%.
Good gollies. Wow.
And, you know, the numbers that we're able to track a little more on a regular daily basis is the departures because of the screening process and all that. But even if you're saying there's, 2,500 to 3,000 people planing, getting on airplanes to leave, keep in mind that a lot of that's crews, too. It's not like just 3,000 people from the public in on airplanes. I mean, there's, flight crews have to be screened and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of employees, if you will, being screened on top of that. So there's very, very little public traveling going on right now. Wow. And we're not alone. I mean, I'm on weekly calls with airport directors all over the country, and some are down 100%. So.
Very good. Commissioner Sandelli?
I just want to take a moment while Ben is there to thank you, the team, and really all of our surrounding communities who responded last Friday night. We have this term now, Stronger Together. I think that was a great example of us stronger together as a Southwest Florida. So thank you, Ben, for your work and for all those that responded.
Yeah, and I'll pass that along. It was a tremendous effort, probably the largest mutual aid response that I've seen. I've been here 45 years, so it was really just watching the whole thing unfold was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the airport's been on fire lately, but not in a good way.
We're on the hot seat, yeah.
No, I do want to say, actually, how many, do we know how many agencies came out and helped us out in mutual aid?
I do. Well, it was estimated to be about 300 personnel.
Wow.
Came and I do have a list of agencies that were here. I can certainly provide that to you, or I could read it off if you'd like. It's up to you.
I just want to make sure we publicly thank all of them. I mean, the mutual aid was just fantastic. Obviously, the fire and the flames and the smoke was impressive,
Right.
but even more impressive was the response by our firefighters from not just the airport, but all around the county who came and helped us get that thing under control.
It was beyond the county. Actually, it was regional. I mean, it was Port Charlotte, Collier County. We had, it was in the 5-county area, every county was pretty much there helping out in one way or another.
And Commissioner Sandelli was moving cars, I heard that night. So
Yes, sir, he was.
And he got kind of
Doing
smoked.
my part. I was running out in the field with Ben.
Yeah, he was out on the front line there for about an hour or so, a couple hours actually. So.
Did his hair get messed up? I bet it didn't, did it?
Pardon me?
Did his hair get messed up or get
You know,
smoked?
you got to run with your part in the wind.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Anything else for our airport
love it.
director? No? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
All right. At this time, I'd like to reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners. And Mr. DeGillet, please introduce item number 2. It is approve a grant agreement with the Gasparilla Island Beach Renourishment Project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, will you present the item, please?
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Yes, this grant accepts a FDEP for reimbursement of 100% of our construction cost and 44% of future construction-related monitoring. The total amount available under this grant is $3.1 million. The county's local match was $356,699.11. And the beach was renourished in 2019 through an agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers, as approved by the board on December 18th, 2018.
Excellent. Very good. Commissioners, any questions on this one? Okay, we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Mann. Do I have a second? Second is from Commissioner Sandelli. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on this item today? Okay, I'll close public comment. Any further discussion? All right, any objections? No objections, that carries unanimously. Okay, item number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, we're asking you to accept a grant for water quality project within Florida Power and Light easement. Dave, will you present the item, please?
Yes. This grant, this accepts a grant from DEP in the amount of $47,798, I apologize, and 19 cents. The grant will reimburse the county for the cost of the feasibility study, design plans, and land surveys. The goal of this project is to improve water quality from Stroud and Palm Creeks into Caloosahatchee River. And this is a TMDL project for total nitrogen removal. And the feasibility study is budgeted in this current fiscal year.
Move the item.
We have a motion for approval from Commissioner Pendergrass, and the second is from Commissioner Mann. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on this item? Okay, I'll close public comment. Any further discussion, commissioners? No? Seeing none, I'll just say, Roger, I really appreciate that you and your team are keeping these important water quality projects moving, even during a time like this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any objections to the motion? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Roger, please introduce item 4.
Item number 4, Commissioner is asking you to award contract for maintenance of Palm Creek in North Fort Myers. Dave?
This contract, this awards a contract to Woods and Wetlands to perform maintenance on a portion of Palm Creek in the amount of $107,500. The creek is located near Palm Creek Drive in North Fort Myers. The purpose is to clear a 1.5-mile section of the creek of nuisance vegetation and any debris in order to restore the flow of the waterway and to ensure the area drains properly during heavy rain events. The work is being done under the county annual contract for nuisance vegetation and debris removal, and the project was anticipated and budgeted in this current fiscal year.
Excellent. Commissioners, any questions for our staff? No? All right. Does anybody wish to speak in public comment on item number 4 on our administrative agenda? All right, I'll close public comment. Do we have a motion for approval?
Move the item.
Okay, motion for approval comes from Commissioner Sandelli, and the second comes from Commissioner Pendergrass. All right. Do we have any further discussion? Any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right. Item number 5, Mr. DeGilet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would ask the board to approve a change order for the Southern Lee County Flood Mitigation Plan. Dave?
Yes, this is to approve a change order number 2 to the contract with AIM Engineering for the Southern Lee County Flood Mitigation Plan. And this is for additional survey and assessment services in the East Moolock Water Control District. The change order will increase the contract amount to $553,670. The purpose of this change order, again, is to include the East Moolock Water Control District in this area under the review, a more enhanced survey. The work will include inventory, surveying, and assessment of existing drainage features within that district. We're currently working on an agreement with the district to pay the cost of this survey through their assessments. The information will be used to correct any existing issues and for further maintenance of the system itself. And this approval does not include any changes to fees or the duration of the previously authorized task of this project.
Okay. Any questions, commissioners? One question for you, Dave. Is some of this eligible to be covered by the grant? We recently got a grant, right, to help the East Moolock Water District?
Correct, but it does not apply to this. That was for other drainage and sidewalk projects within the community, but not for this specific project.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on the Lee County Flood Mitigation Plan? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Do we have a motion for approval? Motion for approval from Commissioner Sandelli, and the second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Any further discussion, commissioners? All right. Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right. Moving on to our 9:30 public hearings. Mr. County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your first of 2 public hearings deals with the approval of the execution of loan documents for the Burgundy Farms Road Paving CIP MSBU funding. Commissioners, I've provided your clerk with proof of publication for both of your public hearings. Under public hearing number 1, this is to allow for the refinance of approximately $460,000 into a long-term debt that will allow the residents that benefited from this project to either pay their assessment up front or over the course of 10 years. We would respectfully request approval following the conduct of your public hearing.
All right, very good. All right, do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on the Burgundy Farms Road public hearing this morning? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Commissioners, does anybody wish to make a motion for approval? Commissioner Sandelli, motions for approval. Commissioner Pendergrass, seconds. Do we have any further discussion? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your second public hearing is for the purpose of approving a resolution to create the Bristol Road Paving and Water CIP, MSBU. Commissioners, this is a project in the amount of approximately $527,000 and will provide for water service as well as front road paving assessments. This will actually create the district, and following your public hearing, we would respectfully request approval.
Okay, very good.
Move on to number 2.
So we have a motion for approval from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do I have a second? Commissioner Sandelli makes the second. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on the Bristol Road Paving and Water CIP? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any discussion, Commissioners? Any objection? No objection. That motion carries unanimously. All right, that concludes our agenda and our public hearings for today. We have no walk-ons or carryovers, correct, Mr. County Manager?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So moving on to Commissioner items. Commissioner Mann, do you have any Commissioner items? He has none. I have no Commissioner items today. Commissioner Pendergrass?
No items.
Commissioner Sandelli?
I have one committee appointment.
Okay. Go ahead with your committee appointment.
Okay, this is for Roger Jacobson from Benita Springs for the Coastal Advisory Council. And this is a new appointment.
Excellent. So we have a motion from Commissioner Sandelli. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Pendergrass. Do we have any discussion? Are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. Okay. Does anybody else have any committee appointments? Commissioner Pendergrass?
None.
Do you have any committee appointments? I have none as well. Okay, very good. At this time, I'd like to call on our county manager for his update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To start with, we'd like to ask you to approve a resolution creating a burn ban. We'd like to defer to the county attorney to present that item, please.
Okay. Mr. County Attorney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the county manager indicated, we would respectfully request the board declare a state of local emergency for the purpose of adopting a burn ban. Commissioners, in conformance with your applicable ordinance, when the drought index reaches 600 or above, we make a recommendation to you for the implementation of the burn ban via the declaration of local state of emergency, and we would respectfully request the board approve the declaration and authorize the chairman to execute on behalf of the board.
Okay. So that is, you're asking for that as a motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution as outlined by County Attorney Wesh?
Move the item.
Okay, the motion for approval is from Commissioner Pendergrass, and the second is from Commissioner Sandelli. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on that resolution? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Do we have any discussion, Commissioners, on this?
How long does it last?
Commissioner Mann? Go ahead, Commissioner, or County Attorney Wesh.
Thank you, sir. 30 days initially, subject to renewal.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, are there any objections? No objections. That motion carries unanimously. All right. Mr. Desjardins, you also had another item you wanted to?
Yes, Commissioners, and one that's not on the recap sheet. Would like to ask Assistant County Manager Martin Moore to come to the podium for just a minute and talk with you about the health emergency, homeless population response. We've heard from some members of the community that Lee County should be taking some action, including opening a tent city. Some of those recommendations are pretty misguided, so I'm going to ask Mr. Mora to take you through the response so far.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Good morning, Commissioners. Good to see that you're healthy and safe this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on the homeless and our response to the homeless during this health emergency. As you all know, our Human and Veteran Services is kind of the quarterback for any of the homeless services that we provide. They are the lead agency for the continuum of care. They work very closely with many organizations, including the Lee County Homeless Coalition, United Way, and the Salvation Army. As a matter of fact, that group put together a continuum of care plan, if you will, for the COVID emergency in regards to guidance on dealing with the homeless during this period of time. The lobby for Human Veteran Services is closed, obviously because of concerns, but they moved their services online. They also have put paper applications outside their office, so anybody who doesn't have access to computers or online services has the opportunity to fill out those forms, including the homeless, and turn them right there in a bin that's located outside of their department. So they're continuing to operate. They have obviously worked with the community before this response. They keep in close contact. They reach out by email, by text, by phone, so they're in constant communication with those that are most in need of those services. There's also homeless prevention services that continue, along with services to the homeless. Assistance with past due rent, mortgage, and utilities, and applications are available online, as well as paper for those services. We have reached out to the Department of Health, who our Human and Veteran Services Department is working very closely with during this emergency, along with the EOC, and we have no positive cases in our homeless population as of yesterday. The staff have reached out also to partner agencies throughout counties in Florida, and there's no report of any positive cases with homeless in those counties as well. So we've consulted CDC guidance in regards to sheltering and the plan for dealing with the homeless. And what we found is that it suggests that sheltering in a congregate setting is more risky than leaving them in the encampments that they're currently in. So our stance at this particular time is to leave the homeless where they are, make sure that we have the services that they need out into the community, but not bringing them into a congregate setting.
Say that part again real quick,
Sure.
because that's interesting, and sorry to interrupt, but so I think, a lot of people with really big hearts out there are talking about the homeless and caring about the homeless right now, and that's much appreciated. But what you're saying is the Centers for Disease Control, the ones whose guidance we've been following for all of these social distancing measures that we're all doing, says it's not a good idea to break up encampments and put everybody together in one tent city?
Yeah, that's the general sense we're getting from their suggestion. Matter of fact, I'll quote them. They say that the risks associated with sleeping outdoors in an encampment setting are different than with staying indoors in a congregate setting, such as an emergency shelter or other congregate living facility. And they go on to say outdoor settings may allow people to increase distance between themselves and others. So in the solutions that we currently have in place, the sheltering that we have in Lee County actually puts people together in larger group settings. If I may continue on giving you an update on the current capacity in our shelters, and we worked with the Salvation Army on this particular assessment, they are right now with limited capacity, and they are not accepting additional homeless applicants. And some of the reasons why they shared with us is staffing concerns. Their staffing is down 65 to 70%. And they have also a desire to improve the social distancing inside of the shelters. So, the stay-at-home order and all of the guidance that the CDC gives as far as distancing applies in those shelters as well. So they have been reluctant to take in more applicants. We also inquired on, well, how many applicants are you getting on a weekly basis? And the information that was shared with us, it's 2 to 4 people per week have been turned away. So they are not sheltering additional folks. But it does not appear to us that there's an overwhelming need for it as well at this particular time. As I mentioned before, the Salvation Army and their partners continue all of their operations as usual. Their reach out as far as food and clothing continues. We have taken some actions, like I mentioned before, in keeping in close contact with our clients that we know that are homeless and in need of support, either be it by phone or email or text. We have continued to leave the Wi-Fi signal downtown library on, which is interesting. A lot of the homeless will congregate there because they still have phones, they still have computers. And when we shut that down, there was a reach out for us to turn that back on. So we've turned that back on during our normal business hours. The libraries are not open, but the signal does carry outside. So we do know that they're out there using Wi-Fi and they're applying for online resources. Also want to share that the rapid rehousing program continues. The Salvation Army does have a contractor on board, and they are reporting very positive trend numbers as far as rehousing those folks. So what else are we doing? Well, for one, the county has submitted a request last Friday to FEMA for reimbursement of housing costs in the case that we need emergency sheltering whenever we have a positive case amongst our homeless or an order from the Department of Health for them to self-quarantine. So we're working on that. We've had a few other partner agencies throughout the state that have gotten approval from FEMA. We anticipate this week that we'll hear back one way or another. We're hopeful that it's a positive response. In preparation, we have VCB working to identify some hotels in the area that would be willing to house some of these folks if we do get a positive test. We really would want a hotel that would be located close to where most of the services for homeless are located, which means it'll be here in Fort Myers. Midtown Fort Myers would probably be the best location. HVS, Human Veteran Services, will manage those cases, so whenever we do get a positive case, they'll step in and provide that support. Human and Veteran Services is also working with the City of Fort Myers to ensure that we have sanitation stations around encampments and where a majority of the homeless are found so that they could sanitize themselves, wash their hands. That's a concern that we're hearing back from the municipalities. That's kind of an update of where we are with the homeless. We continue to work on it and work closely with our partners. If you have any questions, I certainly will take them now from you.
Commissioner Sandelli, go ahead.
Mark, thank you very much for the update and for all the work that's going on. You know, we talk a lot about the virus and so on and so forth. My additional concern is we have a lot of people out of work right now, and there are a number of programs that are available to help them. My concern is we talk a lot about surges. I hate to see more individuals, and especially families, that may be displaced, and I think it would be a good idea that we look a little bit longer term on how we would house a surge, you know, of people that are homeless. So just concerned about it.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner, that's, we appreciate those thoughts. The one thing that might be helpful is the Florida legislature, should they be called back into special session, might consider providing some funding for such an effort. The housing homeless in general is a very expensive proposition when you start talking about families and those that are out of work. There are federal guidelines that make that a pretty expensive proposition. So hopefully we have some local legislators who are concerned enough to perhaps bring that up with their colleagues.
Well, my concern obviously is that we hope this virus gets past, everybody gets back to work and everything, but I'm always playing the what-if scenario to make sure that we're prepared as best we can. So, thank you.
Commissioner Pendergrass?
Great job, Mark. Thank you. And Roger and your staff, thanks for bringing this up and looking at this. So like Commissioner Sandelli said, I think concerned about the future months from now, the fallout from this when a lot of people will be displaced or will be homeless. I'm afraid the population is going to grow, and we probably have the lowest population we've had recently. And Roger, you're right bringing this up. I think some of the state representatives brought this up recently about funding for housing, and I think one of the suggestions was even made about using the City of Palms Park, which we all know is a City of Fort Myers facility, not that you're calling the county to use that, but I think we just maintain it, so they need, I guess, to communicate with the city because the city still owns that. But yeah, there's something hopefully the state will pick up. Maybe they will have a special session after this because a lot of things will need cleaned up after this crisis we're in, so hopefully we'll work with them on that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Quick question that I have, Mark, is does the Rapid Rehousing Act is something that would help families if they do fall on hard times, obviously because of a job loss or whatever throughout this COVID-19 crisis? Is that one program that could help get them right back into a house instead of letting them go homeless?
Absolutely, yeah. It works in coordination with landlords that have vacant homes. It's a program that Human Veteran Services oversees, but partners with the Salvation Army. So yes, it is a resource for families that might find themselves homeless. We've also stood up a hotline or call line, 211, also to direct people to resources that are available for the county. Rent assistance is one of the things that we're seeing increase the number of calls. So, we're monitoring, to the Commissioner's points, what type of resources our community is asking for through those hotlines and also the calls and visits that Human Veteran Services is receiving.
Can you keep us up to date on if it looks like we are running out of funding for the rapid rehousing and for the other rent assistance program so that we could make that request to the legislature and other folks to get that funding down here?
Certainly.
Okay. I think that's a good number to watch because I agree with Commissioner Sandelli. We've got to play the long game and kind of look at how that program is going to be used over the coming months.
Yes, sir.
So, and I think it's going to be up to to everybody, including the legislature, to help us fund that. So, very good. Commissioner Mann, you got any questions? No? Okay.
Chairman, if I could, if it's something on a short note, if we could, I think one of the problems I've been hearing on daily is since the city of Fort Myers, a lot of the parks are closed, the facilities are not open for people that are homeless to use the restroom or wash their hands. So maybe Human Services would contact the city of Fort Myers to see if there's going to be certain times that we can open up the restrooms at the parks downtown or the porta johns around the city of Palms Park. There's, I guess, it's been padlocked, so they're not able to get into the facilities. So it becomes a quality of life issue for the community if you have a population out there that has no access to restrooms.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they need to be able to get cleaned up.
Yeah, at least be able to use the restroom in a restroom facility instead of somewhere else on the street. So,
You know, and one final note on the homeless situation. I did get a chance to talk with Tracy Galloway yesterday, who runs Community Cooperative, and you know, again, we're all really appreciative of the people with really big hearts who are coming out and concerned about the homeless during this time. And I hope they'll continue to be interested in the homeless long after this crisis, you know, passes. But even she was talking with me yesterday about how it would be unfeasible and maybe not the safest idea to take homeless folks from all different backgrounds. So you could take potentially felons, potentially registered sex offenders, and potentially families and congregate them all in City of Palms Park. She thought that was not a good idea, and that was not a feasible idea to set up right now. And this is somebody who obviously works with the homeless every single day saying that. So her opinion carries a lot of weight with me. And so I think we're on the right path. Bottom line is we have no homeless who are positive right now. If one does become positive, we've got a plan in place that we're working to get them housing in a hotel and get them healed up and give them the shelter they need. And we're following the CDC guidance on how to make sure that we care for our homeless population during something like this. So I think it's an important thing that we follow that guidance, because that's the guidance that we're following for everything else. So, all right, very good. Mr. DeJoy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark. Well done. Commissioners, just a quick update on COVID-19. There's not much to report beyond your emergency meeting last week, but since that meeting and following the governor issued Executive Order 20-91, which is been called the Safer at Home Order, parks have been closed. Based on that order, I know there are lots of people who want to be able to use the park, and they're pretty unhappy, which I get. The problem, of course, is monitoring the parks. They're so large, and people want to gather, and they will. And there are still folks who simply they have a self-interest, and they continue to look for loopholes in the governor's order in order to gather, and so it's essential that we keep the parks closed for now. We were talking yesterday about what will be the trigger for reopening parks and other services when the time comes. So the parks remain closed. One of the conversations was about boat ramps as well. We hear a lot about why hasn't the county closed boat ramps, and before we'd be willing to make that decision, we needed some information about how people are behaving at the boat ramps. Even though they are very crowded on the weekends, we're using them almost to 100% capacity. Interesting to note that a year ago at this time, the boat ramps were actually busier than they were this past weekend. Being on the water is an incredibly healthy thing for people to be able to do. So being on the water itself is not an issue so long as boats aren't rafting up and those kinds of things. And the sheriff's doing a really good job of monitoring that and educating people, and people have been very cooperative. But the boat, when we see the photographs that we review of boat ramps in use this past weekend, people were keeping proper distances from each other. The docks themselves are not crowded with people. It's a very orderly process. We'll continue to monitor the boat ramps, over time, over the next 30 days or so, and we'll just see how people behave. If people continue to keep social distancing and the way they're behaving today, it really shouldn't be an issue. We continue with our communications programs right now through the end of May. Marketing in the Northeast, the hot spots around New York, New Jersey, and so on, to marketing for tourists who would otherwise be traveling this time of year that, please stay at home. We will welcome you back with open arms, when this crisis passes. And I think that's all I have for you this morning, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for our county manager? No questions.
Thank you, Roger, for all your staff, everybody working. I think the key thing is, the sheriff said it before, is education, trying to get people to comply. I think we all want compliance here in all aspects of all recreation. So I think right now what we can do is just educate and hopefully get compliance for all the activities going on. Because like, for example, the boat ramps is really important to a lot of people to have that open, because if we had to shut those down because of a few bad apples, it would hurt a lot of people that's obeying the rules. So thank you for doing that for them, because, you would still have people that has the access in their backyards to get on, and then you're taking those, they're more privileged to have that access. So now we're keeping the ramps open so everybody can make use of it. So thank you for doing that.
I'd like to real quick put just one idea out there and see what kind of traction it gets. I understand completely why we made the decision to close the parks in concert with what the state has done on parks. The idea I would like for us to look at is we do have a certain amount of park rangers that could police specific parks. I would like for you all to develop a list of maybe 5 or 6 parks or preserves throughout the county that could be open to walking only, and parks that we could actually have our park rangers stationed at to make sure that nobody's congregating and make sure that we don't have a problem there. But it would be, I think, something that for recreational purposes people could take advantage of if we could open a limited number of parks for walking only. And that's the idea I wanted to toss out there.
Well, for example, one of those is the Lineal Park along 10 Mile Canal, John Yarborough Park. I don't think there's really any facility other than parking. If you had everybody in Lake County go, there would be an issue for parking. But something like that is really not an area for people to congregate. They wouldn't bring their picnic tables and have a kids party like they would at Lakes Park. So that would be, something like that, a park like that could possibly work. But I'd look back on the county manager for his recommendations on that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioners, we had it's timely that you raised the issue. We had a very robust debate in our office yesterday about that very thing. What would it take to open some parks, whether it's the larger parks themselves or the walking trails and so on. The ultimate conclusion that we all came to after about an hour is that we can't recommend opening them at this time for a few reasons. First of all, we still have people traveling to Lee County from the Miami area, the East Coast. They're coming here to recreate, and I don't know how to send an appropriate message to the East Coast of Florida for those folks to stay home, but they're coming here to recreate, and there's lots of evidence to show that. We are worried about opening a few parks, for example, that they will be inundated because other parks are closed. So we would like the opportunity. We will formulate a list as you have asked, but would like the latitude to monitor local behavior and whether or not people from the East Coast are being maybe perhaps a little more respectful and not bring the virus to Lee County from the Miami and Fort Lauderdale area, and then we will report back to you.
I saw in the recent news articles that Marco Island is looking to maybe to open up some beaches next week in Marco Island. And that was obviously, I think, my concern too, like Roger mentioned, people come over from the East Coast. I think if Marco Island does that, that's going to pull more people they go to Marco Island anyway. It's only an hour drive from the East Coast. So a lot of their seasonal residents are going there anyway. So I think that's going to draw away from us. Hopefully Marco Island doesn't do that. But if they do, they'll be going to Marco Island next week if they open the beaches up over there.
Commissioner Sandelli?
I think the other thing that we're getting continued updates from the hospital system, and I think we're in that window, the apex, and so I think that all the things that we've instituted are helping, but I think we have to be really critical over the next 2-3 weeks that we don't take any additional risk, during that period, because I think that's a real critical time.
And that's the thing. Roger, are you going to cover, will you have an update from Lee Health today as far as, the numbers? Because I saw some on Week News last night showing that there's a decline in cases in Southwest Florida yesterday. And when they say Southwest Florida, I assume that's Charlotte, Lee, and Collier County.
We can provide you with a report.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Dave just handed this to me. We have just this morning received approval from FEMA for reimbursement of sheltering positive COVID cases for self-quarantine ordered homeless residents that may test positive. We've been approved for funding to house them in the hotels.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that update. Commissioner Mann?
I'm confused on this issue. I get the same inquiries that y'all are getting about people wanting to use the parks and with a low impact and staying apart, and I'm sympathetic to that. I don't understand why. I think this is a bit of overkill when we carte blanche shut down parks for all practical purposes. But how does this square with the governor's order? I thought there was limited or no options for the county to do in violation of the state.
Mr. County Attorney?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, interestingly, I believe it was a day or two after that order came out, the governor's office also put out a frequently asked questions information sheet. On that sheet, it indicated that counties could go beyond and adopt more restrictive regulations than what was contained within Executive Order 20-91.
More restrictive?
Yes.
We're talking about loosening. Are we not?
Not less restrictive. We couldn't put something on, for example, in the essential business list, we could not take a business labeled non-essential and move it into the essential category. We do not have the authority to do that.
Limit this to parks.
And as well as activities.
I still don't know what the answer is. I thought the parks were closed by the state.
Mr. Chairman, the state closed the state parks. The county closed county parks.
I'm sorry. I thought the state had closed all parks. Wrong? Yes.
Yes, sir. The county closed its parks.
We are following. Sorry. Yes, sir. Okay. So here's where the governor's executive order becomes really confusing in interpretation. In there, he references that everybody needs to follow the same guidance issued by the Miami-Dade special orders. And in there, Miami-Dade closed their parks. And so that was the starting premise for us to close our parks, but
That's
still.
That's where I've been responding to the inquiries.
Yes, sir.
I've gotten.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
That within the spirit of the order and its origin, that we had closed the parks because they were closed by the governor's order. Tracking exactly what you just said.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the governor's order incorporated by reference the Miami-Dade special orders, which included closing parks.
Okay, so I'm back to my original question. I'm sympathetic with. I think that was probably overkill when the governor tries to do something that's going to apply to 67 counties, when there may not be truly an at-risk factor here, practically speaking. And I would like to do what we're talking about, but I don't, it's my understanding we cannot do what we're talking about doing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. County Attorney.
At the present time, that statement is correct, that county parks, by incorporation of the Miami-Dade order into the governor's executive order, are to be closed. That has not changed.
Are we anticipating a loosening up from the governor's office? I mean, that rumor goes around.
Mr. Chairman, I've heard rumors, but I have no basis upon which to make that representation to you. And when and if that occurs, we'd be happy to have that discussion with your administrative staff and communicate with you all.
Well,
but right now,
I think it's
there's nothing.
obvious that all of us are sympathetic to doing something to accommodate those folks that would like to do low-impact social distancing in our park settings. And I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
So if we get that opportunity, I'm back to Roger, keep following this, Dave, you guys, and if there's an opening, let's pursue it.
I agree.
Mr. Chair, I might also add to County Attorney's explanation on the question of do we anticipate the governor loosening any of these orders. The message has come from the Attorney General, the Surgeon General, is that this week is likely to be one of the worst weeks for the entire country, and I would not anticipate the governor issuing any executive orders that would reduce the restrictions that are currently in place. And I would also read to you just from Section 1 from his executive order that says senior citizens and individuals with significant underlying medical conditions such as chronic lung disease, moderate severe asthma, serious heart conditions, immunocompromised status, cancer, diabetes, severe obesity, renal failure, and liver disease shall stay at home and take all measures to limit risk of exposure to COVID-19. Senior citizens being, by definition, those 65 years age and older, unless they are leaving home for essential services, or if they have a job that is considered an essential service to the community.
Thank you.
Is that something, Commissioner Pendergrass?
I just want to add to Commissioner Mann's comments. I totally agree and understand his concerns about being a little bit overreached. But I think what happens is we read the order, and with all good intentions, we hear this is closed, but then also says can participate in activities such as hiking, walking, and we have the best parks in the state of Florida. So I think that's the concern, is we're encouraging one paragraph to tell people to go out and encourage to walk, practice social distancing, unless you're over that bracket of over 55 with those conditions, underlying conditions, you should stay home. But I think it's what's frustrating for staff and for us to try to communicate that back to the constituents is how do you do this? How do you stay home and walk around your house, or you can't go down the street to one of the open parks where you won't congregate. So that's what's frustrating. So I hear you, Commissioner Mann, and I agree with you. But again, I'm also telling the same people, like Roger said, if you have these conditions, stay home.
Yeah.
I choose to stay home. Everybody has a choice. Hopefully people make the right choice and stay home. They shouldn't have government tell them to do that. So they should do that on their own. So the recreations are there. There's guidelines of what you can and cannot do. So it is frustrating that we have some beautiful parks that people should be able to walk on, but it's a management staff. I can understand if you open one park, how many people actually park there. I think John Yelber, how many cars we can get there? 20, 30 cars? You might have 500 people show up. So that would be an issue. How do you manage that? And that's the frustration part of it.
Commissioner Sandelli?
Just to maybe bring a little context, this is from Dr. Antonucci yesterday, as reported by Mr. Smith there in the back and stuff like this. But the growth rate in the state of Florida has become linear rather than exponential, which is a good thing. But the peak is getting close, and we're closer to seeing the worst case situation. So the things that we've done are taking effect, and so we're linear rather than exponential. But we're getting to that apex again, which we're all concerned about. I think that's where we have to make some judgment calls.
Yeah. So real quickly, I'll tell you where I'm willing to concede that everybody from the top down, whether it's the White House Coronavirus Task Force or even the local folks, are saying that the next 2 weeks are the worst and we need to really rein in any types of meetings and things like that. So I'm willing to concede that for the next 2 weeks we should probably leave the parks closed, but I'd like to see us start to think about, once we get on the other side of the apex, a plan to reopen parks in a limited fashion in a way that we could police, so that we can get the public back on their parks and their property that they already own. I mean, walking, hiking, all those things are essential activities that were allowed under the order. So I'm like I said, I'm willing to concede. I think the next 2 weeks, it's really a good idea for us to keep going with what we planned, but maybe let's start to think about the plan for the other side of the next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
if that works for everybody.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and we're working on that now.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or what the period is. But if in fact all the efforts that have taken place in the state of Florida or locally is slowing the spread of the virus, I mean, we know there's only one way to slow the spread, only one, and that is no physical contact from person to person. And coupled with good hygiene and all those things we all know about, and I don't think now is the time to take our foot off the pedal. I don't like this any more than anyone else does. My family is frustrated and they're at home, and your families are frustrated staying at home, and Lord knows we get a lot of emails and posts on Facebook, people telling us just how frustrated they are. But we are working very, very hard to do what's in the best interest of the community, and just don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has. Okay, very good. All right, does that conclude the county manager items for today?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. County attorney?
Mr. Chairman, board members, in follow-up to that discussion, we have for your consideration and hopeful approval the third extension of the COVID-19 state of local emergency declaration.
Okay, motion for approval from Commissioner Mann. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Pendergrass. All right, do we have anybody who wishes to speak in public comment on that? Okay, public comment's closed. Any discussion? Any objection? No objection. That motion carries unanimously. Very good. It's now time for public presentation of matters by citizens. Does anybody wish to speak in public comment today? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. All right, any other business before us? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thanks, folks.